Ah, the Souls-like. When From Software released Demon's Souls back in 2009, the brutally difficult action RPG redefined combat possibilities in games. Earlier, third-person melee combat was mostly a button-mashing affair, with attacks mapped to the face buttons. From Software's Souls franchise completely turned things around with what in retrospect seems like a very simple innovation, mapping attack, block, and counter buttons to the triggers and bumpers. The triggers and bumpers lent a sense of heft to combat attacks. Winding up a heavy attack with a full pull of the right trigger, or parrying with the left, was deeply satisfying. This new approach also allowed for combat that was weightier and more tactical by combining tactical combat with a punishing difficulty curve and a unique risk-reward-based respawn system. The Souls franchise was a breath of fresh air for the entire third-person action genre. Unsurprisingly, a huge number of Souls-like titles have cropped up on a range of platforms. Pascal's Wager on iOS shows that format kind of works even on smartphones. However, for better or for worse, the best Souls-like games have been, well, From Software's own Souls games and their spin-offs. Bloodborne and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Many would-be imitators like Lords of the Fallen managed the basics, but were off in terms of polish and balance. This is where Team Ninja, the developers behind the acclaimed Ninja Gaiden series, came into the picture. The original Nioh was arguably the first Souls-like that more or less stood shoulder to shoulder with its inspiration. With a lighter story and stylized art design, Team Ninja broke new ground in the genre. It was also technically accomplished, scaling well across PS4 and PC. Its successor, Nioh 2, which is actually a prequel, takes things a few notches further. In this piece, we'll be taking a look at Nioh 2 from a technical perspective. As a late 8th gen title, how well does it hold up? How far of an improvement are the visuals, image quality, and performance against the original? Let's find out. Performance and resolution scaling modes on base PS4 and PS4 Pro. The standard practice this generation has been for developers to pick a single resolution or frame rate target, build the game around it, then implement dynamic resolution scaling. 2016's Doom is a great example of this in practice. By switching resolution on the fly, a more or less consistent level of performance is maintained without sacrificing image quality too much. However, with Nioh 2, Team Ninja's taken a different approach. Before we proceed ahead, we wanted to make a note here. On the console front, we analyzed the game's performance by taking some sample scenes from the game and running it through Teardrop, an open-source software. Note that this tool gives us a mere demonstration of the game's performance because an exact one-to-one representation of performance can only be provided by the developers themselves, since they have access to a vast array of tools and profilers. Also note that this analysis only considers the campaign mode. Like with the original game, Nioh 2 features a number of different rendering modes, available on both the PS4 and the PS4 Pro. The default action mode targets a locked 60 FPS, which it mostly achieves. This is done by using aggressive dynamic resolution scaling, with most of the game running at 720p on the base PS4 and 1080p on the PS4 Pro, as well as by cutting down on certain effects. For example, dynamic shadows are rendered in at a much shorter range, and shadow resolution is compromised as well. The movie mode delivers a locked 1080p on the base PS4 and a checkerboard 4K presentation on the PS4 Pro. Missing graphical features are added back in. However, the performance target is lowered to 30 frames per second. While we love the image quality here, the greater input latency means that action mode is just better to play. As a compromise, Team Ninja incorporated a third mode, movie mode with variable frame rate. This mode delivers movie mode's image quality but unlocks the frame rate. It's hit and miss though, as typical frame rates hover in the 30 to 50 FPS range, which can actually make for a worse experience than just locking at 30 FPS. Engine, refinements to the original. The original Nioh had a drawn-out development cycle dating all the way back to 2004, when it was envisioned as a conventional JRPG. When Team Ninja took the lead, early builds of the game were built on the Ninja Gaiden engine. This approach, too, was scrapped, as producers felt the game leaned too heavily on Team Ninja's earlier franchise. An in-house engine was built from scratch to power Nioh. Nioh 2 leverages the same basic technology with the same objective: deliver a consistent, low-latency 60 frames per second experience across platforms. Nioh 2's engine uses deferred rendering, which in theory should allow for a large number of dynamic light sources to appear on screen at a time, with a minimal hit to performance. In practice, though, dynamic lighting, especially from particle effects during combat, is quite limited, most likely for performance reasons. The engine does not use a physically based workflow for texture design. This is a bit of an omission in 2020. It means that texture work on surfaces like armor relies heavily on specular mapping to pop. It also means that surfaces like wood take on a distinctly last-gen appearance, albeit while resolving greater detail. Character rendering. Nioh 2's somewhat stylized art design is more forgiving on lower fidelity assets. Thankfully, though, Team Ninja expanded a considerable amount of the polygon budget per scene on higher quality character modeling, both on the playable character and the NPCs. Unlike the first game, you get to create your own character in Nioh 2. The player model and armor have polygon counts in the mid-5 figures. This is nothing particularly impressive by current-gen standards. However, it does allow for a reasonable level of geometric detail. Neither the player character nor NPCs are blocky, and individual sections in, for instance, plate armor render as real geometry. Lighting and particles. Nioh 2's lighting model is built around maximizing performance without compromising on the appeal of the stylized look. While using a deferred renderer, the game renders in relatively low dynamic light sources at a given point of time. Particle effects don't actually affect the environment around them. There is a silver lining, though. Console titles that aim for a more dynamic look to their particle effects tend to render lit particle volumes at a lower resolution. In these cases, particle effects cast light but are themselves rendered sub-native. Nioh 2 doesn't compromise on particle rendering resolution. While the effects themselves look flat, they present well, especially in the native 1080p rendering mode. Conclusion. At the end of the day, Nioh 2 is about giving choice to the player. With 3 different graphical modes, it's ultimately up to the player which mode they prefer to play the game on. Nioh 2 is not a graphically stunning game, but it delivers a brutally hard gameplay experience along with graphical options that are simply absent on most console games these days. And for that reason alone, it deserves a lot of praise. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, please hit the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to switch on the notifications bell icon next to it. That way you'll never miss any of our videos. Thanks for watching.